The first time I realized my brother saw me as nothing more than background noise, we were both still kids sitting at the kitchen table, fighting over the last slice of pizza. He'd always been louder, quicker with a joke, the one who could charm our parents into letting him stay out late or skip chores. I was the quiet one, the fixer, the person who made sure the lights were off and the doors were locked before bed. Back then, I thought it was just sibling rivalry. I didn't know it was a preview of the future. Years later, that same dynamic played out in boardrooms instead of bedrooms. My brother Alex had a knack for making people believe in him. He could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with a dozen new friends, a few business cards, and at least one person convinced he was a genius. I admired it, even envied it sometimes. But I also knew the truth. Alex was all flash, no follow-through. He loved the spotlight, but he hated the grind. I was the opposite. I liked the work, the spreadsheets, the late nights, the quiet satisfaction of a job done right. I didn't need applause. I just wanted respect. But in our family, respect was reserved for the loudest voice, not the hardest worker. When our father retired and sold his shares in the family business, everyone assumed Alex would take over. He'd been angling for it for years, dropping hints at every holiday dinner, making big promises about modernizing the company and taking us global. I kept my head down, running operations, making sure the numbers added up. I didn't have time for speeches. The day of the partnership signing, the office buzzed with excitement. Alex strutted through the halls, shaking hands, slapping backs, telling anyone who'd listen that he was about to become the youngest partner in company history. I watched from my office, a small smile tugging at my lips. No one knew what I'd been working on for the past 6 months. No one knew about the late-night meetings, the quiet negotiations, the deal I'd struck with the board behind closed doors. The conference room was packed when I walked in. Alex was already at the head of the table, basking in the attention. He wore a new suit, his hair perfectly styled, his smile wide and confident. The partners sat around him, some genuinely impressed, others just playing along. I took my seat at the far end, unnoticed as usual. The managing partner called the meeting to order. Today, we welcome a new era for our firm. Alex, would you like to say a few words? Alex stood straightening his tie. Thank you, everyone. I'm honored to join the partnership. I know some of you had doubts, but I promise you won't regret this. I have big plans for the company, and I can't wait to get started. He glanced at me, his eyes glinting. And as for my brother, well, every boss needs good help, right? A few people laughed, unsure if it was a joke or a warning. I just smiled, my heart pounding. I thought about the documents in my briefcase, the signatures, the wire transfers. I thought about the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment when everything would finally shift. After the meeting, Alex cornered me in the hallway. You see how easy that was? He said, his voice low and smug. All it takes is confidence. Maybe you'll figure that out someday. I shrugged, keeping my tone light. Maybe. He clapped me on the shoulder, a little too hard. Don't take it personally, okay? Not everyone's cut out to be a leader. I watched him walk away, already planning his victory lap. I waited until he was out of sight before letting out a slow breath. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from anticipation. That night, I went home to my small apartment, the one Alex always teased me about. You could do better, he'd say, if you just tried a little harder. I looked around at the stacks of paperwork, the spreadsheets, the contracts I'd spent months reviewing. I thought about all the times I'd been overlooked, underestimated, dismissed. I thought about the sacrifices I'd made, the late nights, the missed birthdays, the relationships that had slipped through my fingers. But I also thought about the plan I had set in motion, the quiet confidence that had carried me this far. I wasn't the star, but I was the architect. And tomorrow, everyone would know it. The next morning, I arrived at the office early before the sun had even risen. The building was quiet, the halls empty. I made my way to the boardroom, my briefcase heavy in my hand. I set out the documents, checked my emails one last time, and waited. One by one, the partners filed in, their faces drawn and tired. Alex arrived last, his suit immaculate, his smile as bright as ever. He took his seat at the head of the table, nodding at me like I was a waiter bringing him coffee. The managing partner called the meeting to order. "We have some important business to discuss this morning. I'll let our guest take it from here." All eyes turned to me. I stood, my heart steady, and opened my briefcase. "Thank you. I'll keep this brief. As of last week, the firm was acquired by a new holding company. All assets, including personnel decisions, now fall under new management." A ripple of confusion swept through the room. Alex frowned, glancing at the partners. "What are you talking about?" I slid the final document across the table, my signature bold at the bottom. "I'm the new owner, Alex, and as my first act, I'm making some changes." For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Alex stared at the document, his mouth opening and closing like he was searching for a punchline that never came. The partners exchanged glances, some of them shifting in their seats, others leaning forward to get a better look at the paperwork. I could see the realization dawning in their eyes, the slow, dawning understanding that everything had changed in the space of a single sentence. Alex tried to laugh it off. "Very funny," he said, forcing a grin. "You almost had me there. But let's get serious. What's really going on?" I met his gaze, steady and calm. "I am serious. The holding company is mine. I bought out the majority shares weeks ago. The board approved the sale. It's all there in black and white." He snatched the document off the table, scanning the signatures, the legalese, the company letterhead. His hands trembled. This can't be right. Dad would never—" "Dad doesn't own the company anymore," I said quietly. "He sold his shares. The rest of the partners agreed to the buyout. You were too busy celebrating your new title to notice what was happening behind the scenes." The managing partner cleared his throat, his voice cautious. "It's all legitimate, Alex. We've reviewed the paperwork. The transition is effective immediately." Alex's face went pale. He looked around the room, searching for an ally, but no one met his eyes. The partners were already recalibrating, shifting their loyalties, calculating their next moves. In business, power is everything. And right now, I held all the cards. He turned back to me, his voice rising. "You can't do this. I'm the new partner." "I'm the boss now." I shook my head, my voice steady. "Not anymore. As of this morning, your employment is terminated. You're no longer affiliated with the company in any capacity." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. For a second, I thought he might lunge across the table, but instead, he slumped back in his chair, the fight draining out of him. The partners began murmuring among themselves, some relieved, others wary, all of them watching to see what I would do next. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders. I'd dreamed about this day for years, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted respect. I wanted to prove that quiet persistence could win out over empty bravado. That hard work mattered more than charm. Alex stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You think this is over? You think you've won? You're just a glorified accountant. You don't have what it takes to run this place." I let him rant, his words bouncing off the walls, losing power with every syllable. The partners watched in silence, some embarrassed, others fascinated. When he finally ran out of steam, I stood and faced him. "I know you think I'm just the help," I said, my voice low but clear. "But I've been building this company from the inside out for years. I know every client, every contract, every number. I know what works and what doesn't, and I know that leadership isn't about who talks the loudest. It's about who listens, who learns, who adapts." He glared at me, his jaw clenched. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll regret it on my own terms." Security arrived a few minutes later, discreet but firm. Alex tried to argue, but the partners had already moved on, discussing next steps, reviewing the transition plan I'd prepared. I watched as he was escorted out, his shoulders hunched, his confidence shattered. When the door closed behind him, the room seemed to exhale. The partners turned to me, some with cautious optimism, others with open curiosity. I outlined my vision for the company, new investments, a focus on innovation, a commitment to transparency and teamwork. I promised them a future built on substance, not showmanship. After the meeting, I retreated to my office, closing the door behind me. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. I thought about all the times I'd been overlooked, all the sacrifices I'd made, all the quiet victories that had led me here. I thought about Alex, about the way he'd always assumed the world owed him something, about the way he'd dismissed me as just the help. I sat at my desk, staring out at the city skyline, and let the reality sink in. I was the boss now. I'd earned it, not with bluster or bravado, but with patience, strategy, and a willingness to do the work no one else wanted. That night, I called my parents. My mother answered, her voice warm and familiar. "How did the meeting go, sweetheart?" I hesitated, unsure how much to share. "It went well. There's been a change in leadership." She laughed, not understanding. "I'm sure your brother's thrilled." I smiled, the irony not lost on me. "Yeah, something like that." The next morning, the office felt different. People greeted me with a new kind of respect, some with genuine smiles, others with cautious curiosity. Word had spread quickly, as it always does in places where power shifts overnight. I walked the halls, noticing how the energy had changed. There was less bravado, less noise, and more focus. I stopped by the break room, where a few junior staffers paused their conversation as I entered. For the first time, I saw something in their eyes that I'd never seen before: hope. I spent the day meeting with department heads, listening more than I spoke. I asked about their challenges, their ideas, the things they wished someone in charge would finally notice. Some were surprised by my questions, others relieved to finally be heard. I took notes, promised follow-ups, and meant every word. I knew that real leadership wasn't about making speeches or demanding loyalty. It was about building trust, one conversation at a time. By lunchtime, my inbox was full of messages from clients and colleagues. Some congratulated me, others expressed concern about the transition. I replied to each one personally, assuring them that the company's foundation was stronger than ever. I scheduled meetings with our biggest clients, determined to show them that the future would be built on substance, not showmanship. Late in the afternoon, I received a text from Alex. It was short, sharp, and full of the bravado he'd always used to mask his fear. "You think you've won? This isn't over. You'll never be half the leader I am." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. That evening, I stayed late at the office, reviewing the transition plan one last time. The city lights flickered outside my window, and for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the years of being overlooked, the sacrifices, the quiet victories. I thought about my brother, about the way he'd always assumed the world would bend to his will, about the way he'd dismissed me as just the help. I realized then that the real victory wasn't in firing Alex, or taking his place at the head of the table. The real victory was in proving to myself and to everyone else that patience, integrity, and hard work could outlast arrogance and noise. I'd built something lasting, something real, and no one could take that away from me. A week later, I hosted a company-wide meeting. I stood at the front of the room, looking out at the faces of people who'd spent years waiting for someone to notice them. I told them my story, not the story of a sudden takeover, but the story of quiet persistence, of believing in the value of every person in the room. I promised them a future where everyone's voice mattered, where success was measured not by titles or bravado, but by the strength of our work and the depth of our character. After the meeting, people lingered to shake my hand, to share their ideas, to thank me for listening. I felt a sense of connection I'd never known before, a sense that we were building something together, something that would outlast any one person's ego. That night, as I walked home through the city streets, I thought about Alex. I wondered if he'd ever understand what he'd lost, if he'd ever see that real power comes not from being the loudest in the room, but from lifting others up. I hoped, for his sake, that he would. When I got home, I called my parents again. This time, I told them everything: the buyout, the transition, the way the company had changed. My mother was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'm proud of you. Not because you're the boss, but because you did it your way." I hung up, feeling lighter than I had in years. I knew there would be challenges ahead, difficult decisions, setbacks, moments of doubt. But I also knew that I was ready. I'd spent my whole life preparing for this, even when no one else believed in me. As I stood by the window, watching the city lights shimmer in the distance, I realized that the story wasn't really about my brother at all. It was about finding my own voice, about stepping out of the shadows and into the light. It was about proving that quiet strength could change the world, one decision at a time. And as I turned off the lights and headed to bed, I smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, and that, finally, I was exactly where I was meant to be.